I'm Stephanie. The plane has just landed in Denver, and the passengers are breaking into applause. It's not the cheerful kind after a smooth landing but the shaky, emotional kind that comes when everyone knows they've just survived something they'll never forget. Police officers and TSA agents are rushing onto the plane. As they escort the man off, his head bowed and hands bound tightly behind his back, he glances up at me for a second. His empty, hollow eyes send a chill through me. I'll never forget this moment. Just a short while ago, I was in a locked service room on the plane, thousands of feet in the air, with no idea what was happening outside. It all started when I was on a flight back home. I had just spent a week in Miami with my dad. He's a hard-working, no-nonsense man who had been feeling under the weather. I'm the only child, and I wanted to take care of him. Before boarding, I called him from the airport. He said, "Be safe, honey. Call me when you land." I promised I would. On the plane, I was in a middle seat in row 20. To my left was a middle-aged woman engrossed in a romance novel, and to my right was a young boy, about 12 years old, playing with his handheld game. The flight was quiet and calm, almost boring. The flight attendant, Ava, came around. She was in her late 20s, with a kind face and a professional demeanor. She asked, "Would you like something to drink?" I asked for water. As she poured it, our eyes met for a split second. There was something off about her expression, like she was distracted or worried. But I thought she might just be having a bad day. I took a sip of water, leaned back, and closed my eyes, thinking about how good it would feel to be home and tell my dad about the beautiful beaches in Miami. About an hour into the flight, there was a light jolt. It was just a bit of turbulence, but I noticed Ava gripping the overhead compartment longer than usual. Her eyes darted to the back of the plane before she forced a smile and continued down the aisle. I felt like something was wrong, but I told myself I was overthinking. 15 minutes later, Ava came by again. She was checking seatbelts and asking for refills. When she reached my row, her hand trembled as she poured water into my cup. The cup tipped over, spilling water all over my lap and tray. I gasped in surprise. "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry," she said, but her voice was shaking. She leaned down close to my ear and whispered, "Follow me. Act natural." My heart started pounding. I was in shock. I thought I might have misheard her or she was joking. But when I looked into her eyes, I saw real fear. The woman beside me gave me a confused look and then went back to her book. I tried to act casual, wiping the water off my tray with a napkin. Ava started walking towards the front of the plane, her steps fast but careful. I hesitated for a moment, then unbuckled my seatbelt. My hands were shaking so badly that I could barely press the button. I whispered to the boy beside me, "Excuse me," and stepped into the aisle. Every pair of eyes in the nearby rows seemed to be on me. I forced a weak smile at another flight attendant who was helping a passenger with their luggage. She didn't even notice me following Ava. When I reached the curtain separating first class from economy, Ava was holding it open slightly, looking back to make sure I was behind her. She gestured for me to come through. I stepped inside, and she immediately pulled the curtain closed. The quiet of first class was like another world. There were only 2 passengers, both wearing noise-canceling headphones and lost in their movies. Ava led me to a small door at the front that I hadn't noticed before. She opened it, and inside was a narrow service space filled with trays, bottled drinks, and small drawers. She stepped in, pulled me after her, and shut the door. The sound of the lock clicking made my stomach twist. I whispered, "What's going on? Did I do something wrong?" Ava shook her head, her hands trembling. "You can't go back there," she said. I asked, "What do you mean?" "Why not?" Her eyes flicked towards the back of the plane, and she whispered, "Someone back there isn't supposed to be on this flight." I thought she was kidding or it was a prank. But her pale, terrified face told me it was real. I asked, "Do you mean a passenger?" She nodded and said, he got on with someone else's boarding pass. We only realized it after takeoff. He's sitting 2 rows behind you. I tried to remember who was behind me. There was a man in a dark jacket. He had kept his head down the whole time and hadn't said a word. I thought he was just a quiet traveler. Now, the image of his hunched shoulders and fidgeting hands replayed in my mind. Ava continued in a low voice, "We've been told to stay calm. There's an air marshal on board, but we can't alert him yet. The man might panic if he realizes we know." I could barely breathe. I felt trapped and helpless. I asked, "So, what do we do?" She said firmly, "For now, stay here. If you hear 3 knocks on this door, it means it's safe. Don't open it for anything else." Just then, through the thin cabin wall, I heard a muffled thud followed by a man's raised voice. Ava stiffened. I whispered, "What was that?" She didn't answer but pressed her ear against the door. The shouting grew louder, though I couldn't make out the words. Ava turned to me, her face drained of color, and said, "It's starting." I realized I was trapped in this locked room, with no idea what was happening behind the curtain. My heart was racing so hard it hurt. I didn't know who the man was or what he wanted, but I knew this flight was no longer ordinary. The shouting outside the door stopped for a moment, but the silence was worse. Ava stepped back, rubbing her forehead. She whispered, "He's still there. I can feel it." Her voice cracked a little. I asked, "You said there's an air marshal on board. Shouldn't he be handling this?" She nodded but didn't seem convinced. "He is, but the man knows we're onto him. He's been watching us since takeoff. We can't confront him too soon or he could hurt someone. He's not armed as far as we know, but he's unstable." I felt so helpless. I thought about my dad waiting for my call. I asked, "Is there anything I can do to help?" Ava looked at me, debating whether to tell me the truth. "Yes, but you have to promise me you'll stay calm," she said. I nodded, gripping the edge of the counter. She took a deep breath and said, "The pilot and co-pilot are trying to get permission to make an emergency landing in Denver. But if the man figures that out, he might try to storm the cockpit before we descend. We can't let him realize we know who he is. Since he was sitting behind you, you might be able to help us confirm something." I closed my eyes, trying to remember. I said, "He wasn't wearing headphones, and I didn't see him eat or drink anything. He just sat there staring straight ahead." Ava said, "That matches. He's been quiet the whole flight, didn't check in properly, and his seat doesn't exist on the manifest." I asked, "What does he want?" Ava hesitated. "We don't know. He boarded using another man's pass. Security didn't catch it in time. He knows we know he's not supposed to be here." I was so scared that my hands were trembling uncontrollably. Ava put a hand on my shoulder and said, "Hey, you're safe here. I just need to go check something with the co-pilot. Promise me you'll stay inside this room no matter what you hear." 3 knocks. "That's me. Anything else, don't move." Before I could reply, she unlocked the door and slipped out. I was alone in the small, dimly lit space. My breathing grew louder in the silence. I stared at the door, waiting for the 3 knocks. Minutes passed, and then I heard muffled footsteps outside. 1 knock, 2 knocks, then silence. My heart jumped into my throat. I pressed my ear against the door and heard low voices. One was Ava's, calm but tense, and the other was a deep, cold male voice. "Where is she?" he asked. I froze. He was talking about me. Ava replied, "I don't know who you mean." But her voice wavered. The man said, "You know exactly who I mean. The woman you pulled out of her seat. Why did you bring her up here?" I covered my mouth to stop from gasping. Ava said, "She spilled her drink. She said she needed to change." The man didn't answer. Then I heard a slow step closer to the door. The floor creaked under his weight. I backed away, gripping the counter. The man said in a low voice, "Tell the pilot. I know what he's trying to do." The footsteps faded, and a few seconds later, Ava's voice came back. "It's okay. He's gone," she whispered. She unlocked the door and slipped inside. Her face was pale, and her eyes were wide. "He knows we're planning to land," she said. I could barely breathe. I asked, "What do we do now?" She looked at me, her voice trembling but firm. "We have to act before he does. If he makes it to the cockpit, we're all in danger." Suddenly, there was a sharp crash followed by panicked shouting from the main cabin. Ava's face went white. She moved towards the door, but I grabbed her arm. "Don't. You said he was dangerous," I whispered. She hesitated but said, "If that's him, I have to help." Before I could stop her, she unlocked the door and peeked out. Her eyes widened. "It's happening," she whispered. I peeked over her shoulder. I could hear a deep, angry voice shouting at someone to sit down, a flight attendant's panicked cry for calm, and the terrified murmurs of passengers. Ava said, "Stay here. Whatever you do, don't open this door unless it's me." And then she was gone. I stood there, frozen, listening to the chaos on the other side. Every sound was like a punch to my chest. Minutes felt like hours. Then came 3 faint bangs, 1, 2, 3. Relief flooded through me, and I opened the door. Ava burst in, slamming the door behind her. Her chest was heaving, and her hands were shaking so badly that she nearly dropped the radio she was holding. He tried to get up. The air marshal stopped him, but he fought back. "He knows we're landing in Denver," she gasped. I asked, "Is anyone hurt?" She said, "Not yet," but her tone made it sound like that could change at any second. She pressed the button on the radio and whispered, "This is Ava in the front galley. The suspect is restrained but conscious. We need clearance to land now." There was static, and then a calm male voice replied, "We're descending early. Stay secure. You're doing great." Ava exhaled shakily and said, "We're almost there. Just hold on." But then something slammed against the curtain. The sound of a struggle filled the air again. Grunts, shouting, and the muffled cry of another flight attendant. Ava's eyes widened in horror. "He broke free," she said. In a matter of seconds, the curtain flew open, and a man stumbled into the first-class section. He was tall, his dark jacket half torn, his eyes wild. The air marshal was right behind him, reaching out to grab him. The man twisted violently, knocking over a service cart. Drinks splashed across the aisle, and passengers screamed. Ava pushed me back, shielding me with her arm. "Stay behind me," she shouted. The man's eyes locked on mine for a terrifying second. His expression was empty, like he'd given up. "Sir, please. Sit down." "It's over," Ava called out. But he didn't move. "You shouldn't have interfered." "You don't understand," he said. The air marshal lunged forward and tackled the man to the ground. After a short struggle, the marshal managed to pin him down and secure his wrists with zip ties. Ava rushed to help, and I just stood there, gripping the counter so tightly that my knuckles ached. When the man finally stopped fighting, the marshal stood up, breathing heavily. "He's done. We've got him," he said. Over the intercom, the captain's voice came through, "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We experienced a security issue, but everything is under control. Please remain seated as we prepare for an emergency landing in Denver." The plane began to descend. Ava looked at me, her eyes glassy with tears. "You did good. If I hadn't moved you, you might have been right in the middle of that," she said. I didn't know what to say. My mind was full of what-ifs. What if Ava hadn't spilled that water? What if she hadn't noticed the man? What if the air marshal hadn't been there? When the plane touched down, the applause filled the cabin. I stepped off the plane, and the cool night air hit my face. I took a deep breath. I was grateful to be alive. We were escorted into a private waiting area in the terminal. The airport was mostly empty, and the echo of footsteps made it feel eerie. The young boy I sat next to was hugging his mom, and the middle-aged woman was still in shock. Ava was sitting in the corner, giving a statement to federal agents. Her hands were still shaking slightly, but her voice was calm. When it was my turn to speak with the investigators, they asked me the same questions over and over. I told them about the man in the dark jacket, how quiet he'd been. One of them said, "You did the right thing following the attendant. That probably saved you." After the interviews, we were taken to a hotel arranged by the airline. It was almost 3 o'clock in the morning when I got into my room. The moment the door closed behind me, I broke down. All the images came back, the spilled water, Ava's shaking hands, the shouting, the fear in the man's eyes. The next morning, I called my dad. His voice broke when he answered. "Oh, thank God, honey. Are you okay? What happened?" I tried to sound steady. "I'm fine, Dad. There was just a situation on the flight." I didn't tell him everything. I didn't want him to worry more. Later that afternoon, I went back to the airport to catch a new flight home. Security was tighter. I saw Ava standing near the gate, talking to another crew member. She looked exhausted but calm. When she saw me, she gave me a tired smile. "Hey," I said. "I never got to thank you properly." She said, "You don't have to. I just did what anyone would do." I shook my head. "No, you didn't. You did what someone brave would do." She smiled faintly. "Sometimes you just have to trust your gut, even if it doesn't make sense at the time." Before she boarded, she squeezed my hand. "Take care of yourself." I said, "You too." And then she was gone. That flight changed me. It taught me that life can change in an instant, and sometimes heroes are the people you barely know. Even now, every time I step onto a plane, I look at the flight attendants differently. I see them as protectors, carrying the weight of hundreds of lives with quiet courage every day.